In the skies over the Pacific Ocean, in the summer of 1943, Japanese pilots began transmitting strange reports to their commanders. They spoke of a new American fighter with bent wings that appeared as if from nowhere and disappeared with incredible speed. They called it the Whistling Death. But this aircraft's path to air supremacy was far from simple. The story of the F4U Corsair began not with triumph, but with a series of failures that nearly buried the entire project. This is the tale of how engineering ingenuity, pilot perseverance, and combat experience transformed a troubled aircraft into a legend. In 1938, the U.S. Navy issued a technical specification. They needed a new generation carrier-based fighter. Vought Aircraft presented a design that looked unusual even on paper. The main feature was the most powerful aviation engine of its time, the Pratt & Whitney R2800 Double Wasp, producing 2,000 horsepower. But this engine required a large diameter propeller to work efficiently, and a large propeller required tall landing gear, which would make the aircraft unstable during landing. Engineer Rex Beisel found an elegant solution. The wing received a characteristic bend that would later be called an inverted gull wing. The central section of the wing angled upward, then folded downward. This allowed the main landing gear struts to be mounted in the thickest part of the wing, making them short and strong. The first prototype, F4U took to the air on May 29, 1940. Test pilot Lyman Bullard flew the machine over Connecticut. The aircraft demonstrated phenomenal speed, 652 kilometers per hour. It was the first American fighter to break the 400 miles per hour barrier, but the joy was short-lived. When carrier trials began, serious problems emerged. The long nose blocked visibility during landing. The pilot could barely see the deck at the critical moment of touchdown. Worse still, the aircraft had a dangerous tendency to stall on the left wing at low speeds. This happened suddenly and asymmetrically. When approaching a carrier for landing, such a characteristic could be fatal. The U.S. Navy was disappointed. In 1942, the Corsair was deemed unsuitable for carrier operations. The aircraft was transferred to the Marine Corps for use from land airfields. This was a blow to the machine's reputation, but work continued. Engineers installed small metal strips on the wing's leading edge closer to the fuselage. These strips disrupted the smooth airflow and caused the wing root to stall first. This gave the pilot warning and made the stall controllable. The visibility problem was solved in several ways. The pilot's seat was raised 7 inches. The cockpit canopy was modified, adding a bulge. Later, British pilots developed a curving technique during landing, approaching the carrier in an arc, which allowed them to see the deck until the last moment. While the U.S. Navy was losing interest in the Corsair, Britain's Royal Navy saw potential in it. In 1943, the first F4Us arrived in Great Britain under the Lend-Lease program. British engineers and pilots approached the machine without prejudice. They methodically eliminated its shortcomings. The wingtips were clipped by 8 inches, so the aircraft would fit in the hangars of British carriers without folding the wings. British pilots developed a new landing technique. Instead of a straight approach, they came in on a curve, offset to the left of the deck's centerline. This allowed them to see the deck from the left side of the cockpit, right up until the moment of leveling just before touchdown. Squadron 1830 of the Royal Navy was the first to master the Corsair on the carrier HMS Illustrious in June 1943. The British proved that the machine could successfully operate from a deck with the right approach. Their experience was carefully studied. Reports from British pilots landed on the desks of American admirals. Gradually, opinions about the Corsair began to change. February 1943, the Solomon Islands. Marine Squadron VMF-124 received the first combat Corsairs. Commander Major William Geist led his machines against Japanese fighters over Guadalcanal. The advantages of the new fighter manifested immediately. The Corsair was 100 kilometers per hour faster than the Japanese Zero. It could climb faster than any Japanese aircraft. Its 6 Browning .50 caliber machine guns provided devastating firepower. But most importantly, the Corsair could withstand hits that would tear a Zero to pieces. The radial engine worked even with punctured cylinders. Armor plating protected the pilot. Self-sealing fuel tanks didn't explode from tracer rounds. The tactics were simple and effective. The Corsair attacked from altitude, using its speed advantage. If a Japanese fighter tried to maneuver, the American pilot didn't engage in a turning fight. Instead, he used the engine's power to break away, gain altitude, and attack again. By the end of 1943, the statistics were impressive. For every Corsair shot down, 11 Japanese aircraft were destroyed. This ratio remained stable throughout the war. In September 1943, Squadron VMF-214 got a new commander. Major Gregory "Pappy" Boyington was an unconventional officer even by Marine Corps standards. Before the war, he had flown as a volunteer in China with the Flying Tigers. Boyington renamed the squadron the Black Sheep. Over 8 weeks of combat over the Solomon Islands, the squadron destroyed 94 confirmed Japanese aircraft. Boyington himself brought his tally to 28 victories before being shot down and captured in January 1944. Captain Kenneth Walsh of VMF 124 became the first Corsair pilot to receive the Medal of Honor. In August 1943, he single-handedly attacked a group of 50 Japanese aircraft while protecting bombers. He shot down 4 Zeros before his aircraft was hit. Walsh bailed out of the burning machine and was rescued. In total, he had 21 aerial victories to his credit. Lieutenant Ira Kepford of VF-17 shot down 16 enemy aircraft in 76 days of combat. He was nicknamed the Solomon Islands Champion. Kepford was a master of deflection shooting, hitting targets at complex angles. Lieutenant Colonel Tom Blackburn commanded the legendary squadron VF-17 Jolly Rogers. His pilots shot down 154 Japanese aircraft in 3 months of combat. Blackburn personally brought his tally to 11 victories. As the war continued, the Corsair was constantly improved. The F4U modification received a new raised canopy, significantly improving visibility. The F4U was armed with 4 20mm cannons instead of machine guns. The F4U became a true workhorse. Pylons appeared under the wings for bombs or rockets. The Corsair transformed into an effective attack aircraft capable of carrying 2,000-pound bombs or 8 unguided rockets. By 1944, the U.S. Navy finally allowed the Corsair on its carriers. Squadron VF-301 began operations from USS Bon-Homme Richard in January 1945. The fears proved exaggerated. With proper pilot training, there were no problems. The Corsair participated in the battles for the Philippines, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa. The aircraft escorted bombers, attacked ground targets, and intercepted kamikazes. The machine's versatility became its main virtue. A night fighter version appeared, the F4U, with radar on the right wing. Night fighters patrolled over the fleet, hunting for Japanese torpedo bombers in the darkness. By the end of the war, Corsair production reached its peak. 3 factories produced machines around the clock: Vought in Connecticut, Goodyear in Ohio, and Brewster in Pennsylvania. In total, more than 9,000 aircraft were built by the war's end. When the war ended, many expected the Corsair to pass into history. The jet age was arriving, but the aircraft proved too valuable to retire. In June 1950, the Korean War began. Corsairs were once again on the front lines. Now they faced jet-powered MiG-15 Soviet fighters that flew faster and higher. Direct air combat between a Corsair and a MiG was impossible, but the main task became ground support. F4U-4S and AU-1s attacked positions, destroyed equipment, and struck at communications. Lieutenant Guy Bordlin of VC-3 achieved a unique accomplishment. Flying a night fighter, F4U-5N, he shot down 5 enemy aircraft between June 29 and July 17, 1953. 4 of them were Yakovlev Yak-18s. 1 was a light bomber, PO-2. These were the Corsair's last aerial victories. The aircraft showed exceptional survivability. The radial engine continued to work even after hits from anti-aircraft shells. There were cases when pilots returned to base with punctured cylinders and damaged propellers. The French Navy used Corsairs in Indochina until 1954. These were the last combat sorties of piston-engine fighters in colonial wars. Production of the F4U Corsair ended in December 1952. The last aircraft rolled off the assembly line 12 years after the prototype's first flight. In total, 12,571 machines were built, more than any other single-engine American fighter except the P-47 Thunderbolt. These numbers speak for themselves. An 11-to-1 kill ratio in air combat, more than 2,140 enemy aircraft destroyed by American pilots alone, tens of thousands of successful combat sorties. But the numbers don't reflect the main thing. The Corsair gave pilots confidence. They knew their machine was faster, stronger, and tougher than the enemy's. This psychological advantage was no less important than the technical specifications. The aircraft that started as a failure, unsuitable for carrier aviation, became a symbol of air supremacy. It served longer than any other fighter from World War II. The last combat Corsairs were retired in Honduras only in 1969, 29 years after the first flight. Today, several dozen Corsairs are preserved in museums and private collections. Some still fly at air shows. The characteristic sound of the R2800 engine and the silhouette of the bent wing remind us of a time when the sky belonged to these machines. The story of the Corsair is a lesson that great achievements rarely come easily. Every problem, every failure, became a stepping stone to perfection. The bent wing that made the aircraft recognizable was not just an engineering solution. It was a symbol of unconventional thinking, a willingness to seek new paths where others saw a dead end. The pilots who flew the Corsair spoke of it with respect and warmth. They called it reliable, forgiving of mistakes, a faithful companion in skies where the price of error was life. Whistling Death, the bent wing of war, legend of the Pacific skies. The F4U Corsair earned all these names,